transgender violence and a Transgender Day of Visibility to celebrate being transgender. Stephen Edginton wrote the report and he joins me now. Stephen Edginton. So, now, I've known for a long time that there's an issue within the civil service and that it has been accused repeatedly by insiders of being captured by whatever this movement is, whatever we want to call it, the woke movement, critical social justice, whatever. What specifically have you found in your recent revelations?
Well, I think that particularly in civil service HR, which is what we're talking about here, which is a hugely dominant area of the civil service. It regulates people's language, it regulates people's behaviour. So if you're accused of doing something wrong, then obviously you're going to HR and they can discipline you or whatever. So some of the things we found was I sort of was reading through reams and reams of HR documents and stuff like this that civil servants were sending to me. And, you know, for example, if you dead name someone or if you misgender someone, you can get into serious trouble. That's seen as bullying, harassment or discrimination. But funnily enough, you can also change your gender day to day. So if you one day you might want to be a man or a woman or whatever, or non-binary or whatever, the 100 genders that they decide. And if you suddenly misgender someone, then you could get into trouble for that. So there's a whole series of things that we found of sort of gender ideology in civil service HR across government departments. And I think there's a real environment of fear created, according to civil servants that I spoke to, about this sort of the dominant nature of this ideology. And if you stand up and say, well, actually, I disagree with this stuff, you're punished, you're not promoted or whatever.
Yeah, no, I've heard this as well. I mean, there was an article by Nick Busvine a few years ago, who was a former diplomat in the Foreign Office, and he was saying that what's happened is these policies are now so dominant that that's how you get your promotions, by sort of paying lip service to them. But this is a very ideologically skewed perspective, and I thought it was the role of the civil service to retain its impartiality.
Well, that's a core pillar of the civil service and has been ever since it was invented, or it started as the British state. So, but of course, this isn't impartial. This is completely contested gender ideology. Although, if you speak to the sort of, I got some critics on Twitter saying, why are you writing this story? This is just completely normal. It's a normal part of HR culture within different big companies. This is totally fine. It's about being polite and stuff like this, which is weirdly true in a way, because I think most big companies do adhere to the same problems that the civil service has. The difference is that this is a publicly funded institution aimed to serve the public, we shouldn't be spending taxpayers' money on this gender ideology. They can do it in their own time. If this is their own personal beliefs, fair enough, they can do that.
But that's it. I mean, there is a kind of coercive pressure around it. I mean, I read that report about an activist group that was invited into the civil service. I think it was a group called Agenda, it's a clever pun. And they were giving a talk where they were saying that the definition of a woman as an adult human female is a transphobic and hateful definition. And they were just saying this as fact. And I do wonder how many civil servants in that meeting stood up and said, sorry, you're talking nonsense. Probably none.
Agender is a really interesting example, and I encourage everyone to look up what agender is. It's a cross-departmental, what they call a network, a corporate network. And there's many, many corporate networks in the civil service. So you can get the non-binary network, or you get the women's network, or you get the gay network, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And that's, a very, very, I would say, probably one of the most egregious examples, the agender, that is, of these networks pushing this ideology. One of the things that I found in my investigation was that, I think it was agender or one of the other networks, they were hosting an event after the murder of Sarah Everard, in the Home Office, and this was for Home Office civil servants to discuss their grievances and their sort of, their problems and whatever after the tragic murder.
Yes.
And this event was segregated into different groups, so you could go if you identified as a woman of colour, or if you identified as a man, or if you identified as whatever. So the implication was that anyone could identify as a woman, and not only a woman, but also you could identify as a different race entirely.